Thank you for such a wonderful introduction. And it's an absolute honor being on the stage, having to launch The English Problem by Beena Kamlani. So, when I first came across The English Problem, we were instinctively drawn to the book. And that's, because at the Bombay Circle Press, since the beginning, our motto has always been to publish meaningful, thought-provoking literature that's not only highly conceptualized in its setting, but also focuses on great character development and characters that stay with you much longer after you finish reading the book. And that's exactly what happened when we at the Bombay Circle Press first read The English Problem. The character of Shiv, the protagonist of the book, who Beena is going to talk about in much more detail, but Shiv stayed with us for such a long time that we were moved and we would come into the office wanting to discuss the book every day. And we instantly knew that we had to bring the book to our Indian readers. And it was a very quick call to Penguin Random House, who's published the book in the US, and we got the ball rolling to bring it to our Indian community. And we couldn't be happier that we could collaborate with Beena here, because she's not only an absolutely wonderful author, but the way she talks about a book, it's even better than the way it's written. And I'm going to now ask Pranika, actually, to tell us a little bit on why the book remains so relatable for generations across India.
Sure. So the book has themes of power, access, identity, belonging, something that we've all grappled with at some point in our life. It's about themes that are very, very natural, which are something that comes to us very naturally, and it's also about the journey that we take. It's in its sense, it's a coming of age for Shiv, and which is why we as readers were absolutely thrilled when we read the book. The journey spoke to us, the journey of Shiv and the journey that he takes. And at TBCP, at the Bombay Circle Press, our ethos is to talk about these characters and their journeys and to highlight them and bring it to the Indian readers so that they can nourish their souls and be involved in the process as much as we are. And I'm not going to waste a lot of time, and I'm going to turn to Beena and ask her, why don't you tell us about your journey writing the book and everything about it?
Everything?
Yes,
sure. I wanted to say thank you to Teamwork Arts, to Namita Gokhale, to Sanjoy Roy, and to William Dalrymple for this magnificent festival. And of course, to Aakriti and to Pranika and to Amulya, companions in the Indian publication of this novel. I think I'm going to begin at the very beginning, which is behind every work of art, there is a story. If you think about it, whether it's a sculpture, a piece of art, a visual painting, there is a story behind it. Henry James famously went to dinner parties in London all the time, often exhausted and hobbled by the previous evening's socializing. But he went because he might pick something up that would lead to a story. So for me, that moment was when my father began talking about this much older brother of his. I think he was older by 17 years or something, almost a generation. And he said he was absolutely brilliant. He had been handpicked by Gandhi to become a future leader of young, independent India. And Gandhi had convinced his father to send this brilliant son to the UK to qualify as a barrister and to come back. And lead from the front lines. My grandfather apparently poured everything he had into the son and sent him to England, and Atma, on whom this story is loosely based, qualified as a barrister and did extremely well. So then I asked my father what happened. Nobody seemed to know. You know, he faded away early. He was a bright spark for a moment and then was no more. He did succeed as a barrister. He became an activist for Gandhi. He began a journal. His friends were Bertrand Russell and the Wolves and Sylvia Pankhurst and a host of other characters. And then I think he had an awful accident and came back to India, accompanied by a British doctor and a male nurse. For me, that ship journey, right between two ports of call, a sort of liminal space where memories and dreams and experiences had the chance to collide and lead to something new that was happening. There is what had already happened in England, there was what was to come in India, and then there was this recollection of experience, of what he had gone through. I had very little to go on. There were 5 facts, basically, that he qualified as a barrister, that Gandhi was a huge supporter all the way through, that he went to the Polacks, very dear friends of the Gandhis. Henry Leon Solomon Polak was a Jewish lawyer and barrister, and his wife Millie, Scottish and absolutely wonderful. They took Atma in, the real-life character, and treated him as their son. They also taught him how to become English. And that is where the true story is. It's that it's becoming something that you're not. It's the journey to proving yourself worthy in one way and unworthy as well in another. What do I mean by that? So I'll go back to how I began. So I had the story, I had these 5 facts. I also had the accident. He'd been through something terrible and then come back by ship. But I needed, I mean, how does historical fact, family history, conjoin with the art of creation to forge a story that has living characters that come alive on the page, where the infusion of soul, of sensuality, of spirit, that's what you need to carry a story forward. Where was that going to come from? And I knew I had the lay chords. The lay chords was what I would come to over and over again. But where was the soul of the story? And it really comes down to 2 things. One was Gandhi himself. There is a very curious British Pathé clip, which all of you should see if you can, if only for its bizarre coming together of things. So there's this very clipped voice, British Pathé, which is now the BBC, I think, or it stemmed from that. This very clipped voice saying, there he is, this bizarre little man coming off the boat. That's the Rajputana for the Round Table Conference in 1931. And it is true, he was a bizarre sight. You saw all these people with their coats and, muffled up, and their hats and their gloves. And this thin little man gets off the ship, accompanied by Madeleine Slade, who was his right-hand person. He called her his daughter, but she was an aristocratic family. She came from a very aristocratic family, the last of the Plantagenets, and was devoted to Gandhi. So she comes off with the goat milk and all of that. And I watched this clip over and over again. I knew it would have to sustain me. It would be the inspiration behind the story. And I knew also that the story would take a very, very long time to unravel. So that was one thing. And the other was the Odyssey. I was very privileged to work with Robert Fagles on his vivid, beautiful translations of the Odyssey and the Iliad and Virgil's Aeneid. And the story of the Odyssey has always haunted me because it's a departure, leaving home, leaving what you know, and then a return, the homecoming, nostos, okay? What happens between these two nodes, the departure and the homecoming? The departure didn't interest me that much. It is an emotional moment, it's full of sorrow, it's full of expectation, hope, ambition, all of that. It was the coming back that interested me. How do you return to a place when you know you've been radically changed? How do you convince people around you that you are still worthy of being accepted into their fold? But of course, you have to prove yourself, as Odysseus did. Did anyone recognize him? He was with Eumaeus, the swineherd, and he swore him to secrecy. The dog did. The dog came wagging his tail, but the dog was the only one who really knew who Odysseus was. It took him a long time. His wife said, "Prove yourself. Who are you? You know, I don't believe you. How do I know you are who you say you are?" That proving of oneself over and over again, I am who I say I am. I am Odysseus. That was what haunted me. Also, to think of the different types of homecomings. There's Rama and Sita, you know, coming back to welcome. They were exiled, there they were in the forest. Their path was lit by candles and lights and joy because, you know, here they were being welcomed home. Then there was Odysseus, who slunk in literally through the back door and had to prove himself and say, "I'm worthy of belonging." Ram and Sita did not have to really prove themselves. They said, "We are the same people who left." I mean, Sita did. She had to walk through fire to say, "I've not been changed. I'm still the person I was." But that's not what happened with Odysseus. And that's not what happened with Shiv, the fictional character for Atma in the novel. He had to prove himself over and over again. He couldn't be a father. He couldn't be a son. He couldn't be a husband. And I think deprived of all the many different elements that basically defined him, he was cut adrift, just like the character in the hull of that ship, ruminating on what his life had been. So that's a backdrop to the novel. I'm not going to give much more away because I really want you to read it. And the scene that I'm going to read is at the very beginning. Have I exceeded my time? 9 minutes to go. Okay. So I think I'll just read a passage from the novel. I do want to say one thing before I go there, which is that the British were in India for 300 years. And for much of that time, the Indians resisted them in their own way, and the British kept to themselves. I think Winston Churchill told Mrs. Vijayalakshmi Pandit, she talks about this in her novel, that Churchill said to her, "We made a mistake in India. We didn't socialize with you Indians as much as we should have." And he also said that you've taught the world to conquer fear and to embrace love, which are not Churchillian sentiments, but he did say that to her. So I think this retrospective look at what this relationship was really about proved to me that it wasn't black and white. It wasn't one bank and the other bank. There was a river flowing in between. And we're still defining what that river is. We're still defining how we've been changed, and how they have been changed by that experience of 300 years that bound them together, first as trading partners and then as administrators and rulers and colonizers. Yeah, you know. So I wanted to work from that perspective. Nothing good can be gained from black and white. It's the river in between that tells us what that story was really about. So if for nothing else, read the novel for that, because I think it is very nuanced, and all my English friends have said that. Anyway, you'll have to read it. So the passage I'm going to read is at the very beginning. Do let me know if I go over. It's the prologue. It was raining, English rain, that first night when he came to England. Thin, fine icicles that fell at a slant and made incisions. Standing outside Victoria Station, waiting for a cab, he felt its needle pricks pierce his skin like markings. This is how England claimed you, through its rain. His hands and face burned and tingled. He felt alive, his senses acutely picking up every impression, from the stone in his shoe to the gaslights rippling through puddles, their slight hiss. Exhausted, yet exhilarated at having finally arrived at his destination, he noted how unsuitable for this alien cold and damp his thin tropical trousers and shoes were. The rain had already seeped through them, and the woolen coat he was wearing, which would have weathered a cool wave in the hill stations of India, was as useless as a rag here. Ah, how it reached for his bones, the chill damp. A low whistling wind funneled through his clothes and up his neck. Warmed by body heat, it seeped out of him like smoke coming out of the chimneys of London's homes. He scanned the traffic on Victoria Street for a cab. When one drew up, the cabby rolled down his window and said, "If it's East London you're wanting to get to, I can't take you." "No," he replied, his teeth chattering, his lips swollen with cold. "It's 24 Gloucester Square." "Hop in then." Shiv lugged his suitcases into the cab and sank back into the seat. Fatigue held him now in a vice. From Karachi to Marseille by ship, 17 days that covered nearly 7,000 miles on the SS Rajputana. Then the drive to Calais, followed by the ferry to Dover, and finally the train from Dover to London. He sighed, drawing cold air into his lungs. Everything he touched was freezing. He hugged himself for warmth. The dampness of his clothes and the lack of heat in the cab made him certain he would catch some terrible disease. Standing outside the door of the house, with his suitcases on either side of him, Shiv felt his heart beating. He felt fear and impatience both. As he had walked out of his father's home with the family to board the ship for England, sobs threatened to break his cool exterior, a facade both he and his family needed so they could do the unthinkable, bid goodbye to one another. Now that he was here, the other side of parting, desolation and uncontrollable anxiety bared its teeth. Had he felt this back home, he wouldn't have come, he told himself. He badly needed a pee and thought about his hosts, an English family who had offered to take him into their home with growing nervousness. His father had met Mr. Polak on a trip to South Africa to see Mr. Mohandas K. Gandhi, who was then living in Johannesburg. The two men had become close friends, and when Mr. Polak visited them in Karachi years later, Shiv had been a 9-year-old boy. "I want to be a lawyer like you so I can save the world," he told a bemused Mr. Polak. His moment had come. He stood outside the Polak's door shivering uncontrollably. His teeth chattered. More than likely, his host wouldn't recognize him. There was no going back now. So he goes in. I won't read the preamble that takes him into the home. The heat from the blazing fire in the grate hit his face, drying and warming him at the same time. He saw flushed red faces, glasses filled with wine, trays of cheese and smoked salmon, brown bread and butter. He recalled the pictures his English tutor back in Hyderabad, Sindh, had shown him in anticipation of a time when he would leave India for England. Beer, wine, smoked salmon, mince pies, spotted dick. Now here they were, These trays of smoked salmon and deviled eggs, wine and beer. The women were in pals, the men in suits, and everyone was very jolly. Mr. and Mrs. Pollack received him warmly, she with an embrace, he with a hearty handshake. "You're here, my boy," he said, "just in time. We're celebrating our 25th, Millie and I and our friends. Feast today. We go back to Gruel tomorrow." Everyone laughed as they turned to look at him. Mr. Pollack handed him a fluted glass and poured a hissing liquid into it. "Champagne?" Shiv wondered. "Cheers. Welcome to London," Mr. Pollack said. Shiv squirmed as his guests examined his thin, wet trousers. The bright silk scarf wrapped around his neck marked his uneasiness. One elderly woman fixed her lorgnettes on him as she rammed them up his body from head to toe. Her jowly face and bejeweled fingers glinted. Her inquisitive eyes were like lice combs as they teased out his discomfort. He felt like an animal in a zoo. "I've never seen one of them in the flesh before, Henry," she said, turning to her host. "He won't be a stranger to you for long, Lady Sophia," Mr. Pollack said. "You'll be seeing a lot of him. I promise you that." And then I'll just read the very last bit of this bit. With a glass of champagne in one hand, which he had disliked at first sip, and a smoked salmon canapé in the other, he laughed at everything they said and tried to suppress the intense loneliness that gripped him as he looked around the room. These were his country's oppressors, and here he was, one of the chosen, sent to live among them, become like them. His father's parting words came to him now, the bewildered look on his face, as if he was reconsidering his decision to pack his son off to the land of their oppressors. It's too late to wonder if this is the right thing. There's no avoiding it. You will come back an Englishman, for that is the only way to succeed in their world. He glanced around as the crowd became merrier. They soon lost interest, the novelty of a brown-skinned man who had landed so unexpectedly among them beginning to wear off. As the observer now, rather than the observed, he viewed them as members of a tribe at war with his own, and himself as an interloper in their midst. The steamy damp from the cuffs of his trousers traveled up his legs like a tropical breeze. "Never," he told himself as he took in the flushed faces of the guests and heard their champagne-fueled laughter. "I will never become an Englishman."
That was, I think, that sums up the book in just a few words that Beena shared. And as a last parting message, I would like to say that despite this being a historical fiction book, it's a book that's deeply personal and will be with you long after you read it because you will be embroiled in the characters and the historically rich setting. And with that, our time is up. Thank you so much, Beena, Pranika, and Teamwork Arts for having us here today and for the wonderful audience.